You know that image of a pirate captain standing on a ship with a parrot on his shoulder? Eye patch over a battle wound, treasure map in one hand, and a crew of drunk lunatics behind him? Yeah, almost every single detail in that picture is completely wrong. Hollywood has been lying to your face about pirates for over 100 years, and the real history is so much weirder, dumber, and more absurd than anything a screenwriter ever came up with. These are 33 pirate myths the movies sold you, and the ridiculous truths behind every single one. 1. Hollywood wants you to believe every pirate wearing an eye patch lost an eye in some dramatic sword fight. Looks great in a close-up, sure, but the leading theory is way more genius than that. See, human eyes take about 20 minutes to fully adjust from bright sunlight to total darkness. Now imagine you are fighting on a sun-drenched deck and suddenly need to chase someone into the pitch-black lower decks. Congrats! You are basically a blind man with a sword. The solution? Keep one eye permanently covered so it stays adapted to the dark. When you go below deck, flip the patch, and boom, instant night vision like some kind of 18th century Navy SEAL with a budget of $0. No battle scar needed. Just big brain energy from guys Hollywood wants you to think we're dumber than a bag of wet rocks. 2. Every pirate movie features someone gracefully swan diving off a ship and swimming to safety like it is an Olympic event. One tiny problem. The vast majority of sailors in the 17th and 18th centuries could not swim. At all. People whose entire careers took place on water had literally zero ability to survive in it. Falling overboard was not an inconvenience. It was a death sentence. Even if you landed just a few meters from another ship or a visible shoreline, you were toast. No lifeboats. No life jackets. No floaties shaped like flamingos. And here is the kicker. Some navies actually discourage sailors from learning to swim because they figured if you cannot swim, you will fight way harder to keep the ship afloat. So every time Hollywood shows a pirate casually doing the backstroke after an explosion, just know that man would have sunk faster than your uncle's fantasy football team. 3. In the movies, pirate ships cruise across the open ocean proudly flying the skull and crossbones for everyone to admire. In reality, flying a pirate flag 24/7 would be the nautical version of a bank robber driving to the job with a giant bumper sticker that says, "I am here to rob you, please call the cops." Real pirates were way smarter than that. They carried a whole closet full of flags from different nations. When they spotted a target, they would raise a friendly one, maybe British, maybe Spanish, whatever matched the victim. They would sail up real casual, close the gap, and only at the very last possible second, when escape was impossible, would they rip down the fake flag and hoist the Jolly Roger. The black flag was not a fashion statement. It was a psychological weapon deployed at exactly the right moment. Pirates literally invented catfishing 300 years before anyone had a Wi-Fi password. 4. If you have watched any pirate movie, you probably think every raid ended with someone cracking open a huge chest overflowing with gold doubloons while dramatic music played. The reality was about as glamorous as a trip to Costco. Most pirate loot was boring stuff. We are talking wood, rope, cloth, sugar, soap, and medicine. Yes, soap. Turns out that keeping a crew alive on a disease-ridden ship was slightly more important than looking rich. And medicine? A well-stocked medical chest was the ultimate jackpot, the pirate equivalent of winning the lottery. In 1718, the pirate Blackbeard blockaded the entire port of Charleston, South Carolina. His big, scary demand? Not gold, not jewels. A chest of medicine, likely including treatments for syphilis. Because apparently even the most feared pirate on the Atlantic was terrified of a disease, which honestly is the most relatable thing a pirate has ever done. 5. Walking the plank is the single most iconic pirate punishment in movie history. The dramatic slow walk, the blindfold, the splash. Audiences have eaten it up for decades, and it is almost entirely fiction. Historical records show barely a handful of documented cases, and most happened well after the golden age of piracy had already ended. Real pirates had zero patience for theatrics. If they were feeling generous, they would maroon someone on a deserted island, sometimes leaving one pistol with one bullet, just to really spice up the psychological damage. If they were not feeling generous, they had keel hauling, which involved tying you to a rope and dragging you underneath the entire length of the ship. The hull was covered in razor-sharp barnacles, so you would be sliced apart while simultaneously drowning. No director yelling, "Cut." No second take. Just barnacles and bad decisions. The real punishments were so much worse than a plank that Hollywood probably could not show them and keep a PG-13 rating. 6. Hollywood loves showing pirate ships as floating frat houses where the captain screams orders and everyone else just vibes between drinking sessions. The truth is almost the opposite. Pirate ships were some of the most democratic places on the planet, at a time when most of the world lived under kings who literally believed God picked them for the job. Captains were elected by popular vote, and they could be voted out just as fast if the crew got tired of their nonsense. Pirate crews drafted written constitutions, called articles, that every member signed before joining. These documents covered profit sharing, disability compensation, job duties, and behavioral rules. Some pirate articles were more progressive than the actual governments chasing them. The captain only had absolute power during battle. The rest of the time, a quartermaster handled daily operations and disputes. So while kings in Europe were beheading people for wrong opinions, pirates were holding elections and writing contracts. Democracy was literally floating around on criminal ships before most countries figured it out. 7. No pirate captain in any movie is complete without a colorful parrot perched on their shoulder, squawking catchphrases at enemies. Cute image. Total garbage. Pirates did encounter exotic animals, parrots included, but they were not keeping them as adorable little shoulder buddies. These creatures were cold, hard cash with feathers. Exotic animals fetched insane prices back in Europe, where wealthy aristocrats would pay a fortune for anything weird and tropical. A single healthy parrot could be worth more than several months of a sailor's pay. Pirates looked at a parrot and saw a flying wallet, not a pet. The entire parrot on the shoulder thing comes almost exclusively from Robert Louis Stevenson's novel Treasure Island, where the character Long John Silver had a parrot named Captain Flint. One fictional bird from one book published in 1883, and suddenly every pirate in the history of Halloween costumes has a feathered companion. Stevenson pulled off the greatest product placement in literary history, and the parrot did not even have an agent. 8. Everyone knows the Jolly Roger. The black pirate flag with the white skull. In movies, it is the scariest thing on the ocean. But in actual pirate history, the black flag was basically the polite option. A black flag meant, surrender now and nobody has to die today. It was an invitation to cooperate. The flag you absolutely, positively, under no circumstances wanted to see was a red one. The red flag, sometimes called the Joli Rouge, which historians believe is actually where the name Jolly Roger came from, had a very simple message. No quarter, no mercy, no survivors. When a red flag went up, it meant the pirates had already decided everyone on the target ship was going to die, whether they fought back or not. Black flag meant you had a choice. Red flag meant your choices were already made for you. Hollywood only ever shows you the skull and crossbones because apparently a plain red flag does not look cool enough for a movie poster, even though it was historically about 1,000 times more terrifying. Marketing really does ruin everything. 9. In every pirate movie, the boarding scene features someone grabbing a rope and swinging majestically through the air, sword in one hand, landing perfectly on the enemy deck with both feet. Looks incredible. It is also a fantastic recipe for 2 broken legs and a concussion. Ships on the open ocean are constantly moving in random, unpredictable directions. Swinging on a rope from one violently rocking surface to another violently rocking surface while wearing heavy boots and holding weapons is not bravery. It is an insurance claim waiting to happen. Real boarding tactics were way less photogenic. Pirates used grappling hooks to physically drag the 2 ships together until the hulls were touching. Then they threw over wooden planks or just climbed across like normal humans. Sometimes they tossed stink pots, which were homemade smoke bombs filled with sulfur and rotten garbage, onto the enemy deck to create confusion before climbing over. Effective, practical, zero acrobatics. Hollywood picked style over physics, and honestly, nobody is even a little bit surprised. 10. Movies show pirate earrings as pure fashion, just part of the outlaw aesthetic. A little bling to go with the bad attitude. But those gold hoops were not about looking cool. They were about paying for your own funeral. Many sailors wore a single gold earring, specifically worth enough to cover a proper Christian burial. The logic was brutally practical. If your body washed up on some random beach, whoever found you could take the earring as payment for giving you a decent grave, instead of leaving you to rot next to the seagulls. Some pirates even had the name of their home port engraved on the inside, basically turning a hoop earring into an 18th century dog tag so the body could be identified and the family notified. That is not fashion. That is a man wearing his own funeral fund on his ear every single day while being fully aware that the ocean was probably going to kill him way before retirement. Suddenly, those earrings in the Pirates of the Caribbean look a lot less fun and a lot more like a prepaid burial plan with really good branding. 11. Pirate movies love gigantic warships. Enormous galleons with rows of cannons, towering masts, and enough crew to fill a small Walmart. Looks absolutely epic on the big screen. In reality, most pirates would rather eat their own boots than sail one of those floating parking garages. The ships pirates actually preferred were small, fast sloops. Nimble little vessels that could outrun almost anything the Royal Navy threw at them, and could sail into shallow coastal waters where heavy warships physically could not follow. A giant galleon was slow, required a massive crew, and was essentially a billboard that screamed, "Important ship, please chase me." A sloop could hide in coves, dart between islands, and vanish before anyone confirmed what they saw. Pirates wanted the nautical equivalent of a getaway car, not a floating shopping mall with cannons. Speed and stealth beat firepower when your entire business model depends on not getting caught, which is a lesson that apparently every movie director refused to learn. 12. According to Hollywood, the deck of a pirate ship was an all-boys club. No women, no exceptions. This is spectacularly wrong. Anne Bonny and Mary Red are the most famous examples, both sailing with the pirate Calico Jack Rackham in the early 18th century. By most accounts, they were among the most ferocious fighters on the crew, putting most of the men to shame. But they are basically interns compared to the greatest pirate who ever lived. Qing Shi, a former sex worker from Canton, married a pirate captain, and when he died, she did not sit around looking sad. She took command of the entire Red Flag fleet, which at its peak included roughly 1,800 ships and up to 80,000 pirates under her authority. She was so powerful that the Chinese Navy, the Portuguese Navy, and the British Navy all tried to take her down. All of them failed. She eventually retired undefeated, negotiated a full pardon for her fleet, and spent her golden years running a gambling house. The most successful pirate in recorded history was a woman, and Hollywood has barely whispered her name. Somebody give this lady a franchise. 13. Movie pirates fire flintlock pistols with incredible accuracy, dual-wielding them like an action hero who went to the John Wick School of Firearms. The reality of 18th century guns at sea was significantly more embarrassing. Flintlock pistols relied on a tiny spark from a flint hitting steel to ignite gunpowder. Now add constant salt spray, tropical humidity, and the general wetness of existing on a boat. You get a weapon that misfired roughly half the time. When a flintlock actually did fire, you got one shot. 1. Reloading took at least 30 seconds under perfect conditions, which combat on a rocking ship absolutely was not. So what happened after the one potentially successful shot? They flipped the pistol around and used it as a blunt weapon, smacking enemies in the face with the heavy metal handle. This is why many pirates strapped 4, 5, or even 6 loaded pistols across their chest. Not for style points, but because statistically, maybe 3 of them would actually work. The rest were just very expensive hammers. Honestly, their hit rate was worse than stormtroopers, and at least stormtroopers had laser guns. 14. Thanks to pop culture, rum and pirates go together like peanut butter and jelly. And yes, pirates drank rum, but they were not guzzling it straight from the bottle like a frat house on spring break. The everyday drink on a pirate ship was grog, which was rum mixed with water and sometimes lime juice or sugar. and the reason was not recreational. Fresh water stored in wooden barrels on a ship turned absolutely disgusting within days. It would go green, grow slime, develop a smell that could make a goat pass out. Mixing it with rum killed enough bacteria to make it somewhat drinkable without instantly causing a medical emergency. Grog was the pirate version of a Brita filter, except it also got you buzzed. The British Royal Navy eventually formalized this into official regulation, giving every sailor a daily rum ration specifically for water purification purposes. So every movie scene where a pirate is dramatically knocking back rum is actually showing you an 18th century water sanitation technique that happened to come with a mild buzz. Staying alive has never tasted so fun, or so irresponsible by modern standards. 15. The black spot. That creepy piece of paper with a black circle on it, hand-delivered as a formal pirate death sentence. You receive one, and your days are numbered. Absolutely terrifying stuff. It would be if it had ever actually existed. The entire concept of the black spot was invented by Robert Louis Stevenson for his 1883 novel, Treasure Island. Zero historical evidence. No pirate crew ever used a fancy marked piece of paper as an official death notice. Real pirates were considerably more direct about killing people. If they wanted you dead, they would just do it. Or they would vote on it first because, as we already covered, pirates were obsessed with democracy. The black spot is now so deeply baked into pirate mythology that people genuinely think it was an ancient maritime tradition, when it is really just excellent fiction from a Scottish novelist who needed a cool plot device. And honestly, Stevenson deserves some kind of award. The man is single-handedly responsible for like half the pirate myths on this list. He created an entire fake culture from his writing desk in Scotland, which is the most impressive con job in literary history. 16. Hollywood loves a dramatic fight scene with a pirate rocking a wooden peg leg, somehow performing acrobatic swordplay while keeping perfect balance on a rocking ship. Entertaining? Absolutely. Realistic? About as realistic as a penguin flying a helicopter. Losing a limb during the age of piracy was a catastrophic event. There were no antibiotics, no sterile operating rooms, no anesthesia beyond a bottle of rum, and a leather strap to bite. Amputation was performed by the ship's surgeon, or more often by the cook, because the cook was the guy with the most experience cutting through meat and bone, which is both logical and deeply horrifying. If you survived the actual cutting, and then survived the near-certain infection, your fighting career was over. A pirate who lost a leg was reassigned to cooking duty or other non-combat jobs. Pirate articles actually included disability compensation for lost limbs, paying different amounts depending on which body part you said goodbye to. Left leg was worth more than right arm, and so on. It was basically workers' compensation, invented by criminals, centuries before any government thought of it. Your HR department could never. 17. Every pirate movie, show, theme park ride, and Halloween decoration is set in the Caribbean. You would think pirating was a Caribbean-only activity, like a really violent regional sport with a great climate. But the Caribbean was actually the minor leagues compared to what was happening elsewhere. The Indian Ocean was an absolute goldmine. Trade routes between India, Arabia, and East Africa moved unimaginable fortunes in spices, silk, and precious metals. Pirates operating out of Madagascar intercepted those routes and got spectacularly rich. Then there was the South China Sea, where Qing Shi's enormous fleet ran the show. The scale of Asian piracy made the Caribbean look like a kiddie pool. Caribbean pirate crews numbered in the dozens or low hundreds. Chinese pirate fleets operated in the tens of thousands. Hollywood fixates on the Caribbean because it has nice beaches and pretty sunsets, but the most profitable and dangerous piracy was happening on the other side of the planet. The Caribbean was basically the community theater of piracy, while Asia was running Broadway. 18. Every naval battle in a pirate movie features ships absolutely destroying each other with cannon fire. Explosions everywhere, masts crashing, hulls splintering, visually spectacular, financially moronic. Think about it for 2 seconds. Pirates wanted to steal the cargo and ideally the ship itself. You do not steal something by blowing it into toothpicks. Cannons were expensive to fire, dangerous to operate, and did massive structural damage to the very thing you were trying to take. The real pirate strategy was pure intimidation. Fire a single warning shot across the bow. Raise the Jolly Roger. Let the merchant crew do the math. And most of the time, it worked perfectly. Merchant sailors were not being paid nearly enough to die heroically for someone else's sugar shipment. The vast majority of pirate captures involved zero actual combat. Flag goes up, merchant crew gives up, pirates transfer goods while being surprisingly civil about the whole thing. A battle meant the plan had failed. It was the pirate equivalent of a business deal going sideways. Nobody wanted it. It just meant someone was being stupid. 19. The filthy pirate is one of Hollywood's favorite stereotypes. Greasy hair, rotting teeth, covered in grime, looking like they have not seen a shower since the invention of dirt. In reality, many pirate crews were cleaner than the sailors in legitimate navies. And the reason was survival math. A pirate ship was small with a tight crew, living in very close quarters. One disease outbreak could wipe out the entire ship within weeks. Pirates understood this, even without knowing what a germ was. Hygiene was not optional, it was life or death. Many pirate articles actually included specific rules about keeping the ship and personal areas clean. Meanwhile, Royal Navy sailors were crammed onto overcrowded ships by officers who could not care less whether they survived, since more men could always be forced into service. So the supposed savages of the sea were maintaining better hygiene than the so-called civilized forces trying to hang them. The guys with the skull flags smelled better than the guys with the royal crests. History does not get more ironic than that, and it does not get funnier either. 20. Thanks to the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, most people think the Flying Dutchman was a legendary pirate warship captained by the supernatural king of the ocean floor. In actual maritime folklore, the Flying Dutchman was not a pirate ship at all. It was a regular merchant vessel belonging to the Dutch East India Company, the most boringly corporate ship you could possibly imagine. Basically the 18th century version of an Amazon delivery truck. According to legend, the ship was trying to round the Cape of Good Hope during a terrible storm, and its captain, usually identified as Willem van der Decken, either cursed God or stubbornly refused to wait out the weather. As punishment, the ship was doomed to sail the oceans forever, never reaching port. That is the whole story. No pirate crew, no supernatural weapons, no dramatic underworld. Just a stubborn Dutch merchant who yelled at a storm and got turned into a permanent floating lesson about anger management. Hollywood took the most boring corporate shipping legend in maritime history and turned it into a multi-billion-dollar pirate spectacular, which honestly might be the most impressive rebranding since Kentucky Fried Chicken tried to pretend it was healthy. 21. The treasure map with a big red X marking the spot is probably the single most iconic pirate image in all of popular culture, and it is almost completely fictional. The overwhelming majority of pirates never buried a single coin. They blew through their money almost the second they got it, mostly on alcohol, gambling, and entertainment in port towns that existed exclusively to separate pirates from their cash. Port Royal in Jamaica and Nassau in the Bahamas were basically Pirate Vegas, minus the buffets. The only confirmed case of a pirate actually burying treasure is Captain William Kidd, who stashed a relatively modest haul on Gardiner's Island near New York in 1699, hoping to use it as a bargaining chip during his trial. Spoiler alert. It did not work. He was hanged. So, out of thousands and thousands of pirates during the Golden Age, exactly one guy buried treasure, and he did it as a desperate legal move, not some master plan. Every treasure map in every movie traces back to the one terrible decision of one very unlucky man. That is like basing an entire cultural myth on one guy who forgot to clear his browser history. 22. In every Hollywood pirate movie, the crew looks like a casting call for a British historical drama. Everyone is white, British, and speaks with the same accent. The actual demographics of real pirate crews would blow modern audiences away. These ships were among the most racially diverse communities on the face of the earth. Historians estimate that black sailors, many of them escaped slaves, made up a significant portion of many crews, sometimes as much as a third or more. Pirate ships also included indigenous Americans, mixed-race sailors, and men from basically every nation that had a coastline. And unlike the navies and merchant fleets of the era, where black men were treated as literal property, pirate ships offered something much closer to equality. On many crews, black pirates carried weapons, received equal shares of plunder, and voted on ship decisions alongside everyone else. For an escaped slave in the early 18th century, a pirate ship was arguably the freest workplace on the planet. The people society labeled the worst criminals of the age were running more diverse and equitable operations than the respectable world trying to execute them. Let that one marinate for a minute. 23. Shiver me timbers, walk the plank, ye scallywag. If you just read that in a pirate voice in your head, congratulations, you have been fully brainwashed by fiction. Almost none of the supposedly classic pirate phrases were ever uttered by an actual pirate. Shiver me timbers came from novels and stage plays, and the famous pirate accent was largely invented by a single person, the actor Robert Newton, who played Long John Silver in the 1950 Disney film Treasure Island. Newton used a thick West Country English accent from the region where he actually grew up, and his performance was so absurdly memorable that his personal hometown dialect became the universal pirate voice for all of eternity. Real pirates spoke whatever normal language or dialect they grew up with. Boring nautical terms about wind direction and knot speeds, not dramatic one-liners. The entire pirate vocabulary that pop culture has drilled into your brain was manufactured by novelists, screenwriters, and one extremely committed British actor who had no idea he was defining an entire fictional language forever. Authentic pirate conversation would be about as thrilling as listening to your coworker explain their commute. 24. In the movies, pirate captains execute their own crew for the slightest mistake. Look at the captain wrong and you are swimming with the sharks. It is portrayed as if death was the default punishment for literally everything from spilling soup to sneezing during a speech. In practice, killing your own crew was absolutely terrible management. Every pirate on board was a skilled worker who could not be replaced mid-ocean. You cannot exactly post a job listing in the middle of the Atlantic. Dead sailors meant fewer hands to operate the ship, fewer fighters during raids, and less overall capability. The standard punishment for most offenses was called Moses' Law, which was 39 lashes on the bare back. The number 39 comes from a biblical tradition that capped punishment at 40, and they deliberately stopped one short to avoid accidentally going over. For more serious crimes like stealing from crewmates, the sentence was typically marooning, being dumped on a deserted island with almost nothing. Outright execution required a crew vote and was saved for extreme situations. Pirates were harsh, absolutely, but they understood basic labor economics better than most Hollywood HR departments. Dead employees generate zero revenue. Even criminals know that. 25. Hollywood dresses pirates in filthy rags and dirty bandanas, looking like they exclusively shopped at the dumpster behind a medieval Goodwill. Some pirates were badly dressed, sure, but many of them wore the exact opposite of rags. When pirates captured a wealthy merchant vessel, the expensive clothing on board was primo loot. Velvet coats, silk shirts, fine leather boots, embroidered jackets. The kind of wardrobe only aristocrats could normally afford. And pirates did not just wear this stuff out of necessity. They wore it as calculated, deliberate mockery. Strutting around in stolen nobleman clothing was a massive insult to the ruling class, a way of saying, your wealth means nothing because I can literally just take it off your ship. The pirate Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, was legendary for going into battle wearing a rich crimson damask waistcoat, a red feathered hat, and a diamond-studded gold cross around his neck. He looked like he was attending a royal wedding, not commanding a naval assault. Pirates were not ragged outcasts. Many of them were the best-dressed criminals on the entire planet, and they did it specifically to make rich people angry, which is honestly a level of petty I can deeply respect. 26. Pirates in movies are permanently wasted. Every single scene on a ship has someone stumbling around with a bottle, slurring orders, and somehow still winning sword fights through what can only be described as drunk luck. If real pirate crews operated this way, they would have been at the bottom of the ocean within a week. Most pirate codes strictly prohibited drinking below deck and specifically banned open flames, including lit pipes and candles, anywhere near the gunpowder storage. The reason should be painfully obvious. Below the deck of every pirate ship sat barrels of extremely explosive gunpowder. One drunk idiot stumbling into a candle in the wrong spot could turn the entire vessel into the world's first accidental fireworks show. Bartholomew Roberts' articles specifically stated that all drinking had to happen on the open deck, and there was a firm lights-out curfew at 8 in the evening. After that, any drinking had to be above deck in the open air. Pirates drank plenty, nobody is arguing that. But they were extremely organized about when and where it happened, because the alternative was going from party on a boat to explosion in the ocean in about half a second. 27. Movies always use the same pirate flag. Black background, white skull, maybe some crossed bones. One standardized design for every pirate everywhere, like they all went to the same flag store that also only sold one flag. In reality, the Jolly Roger was more like a personal logo. Every notable captain designed their own unique flag, and these designs got wildly creative. Blackbeard's flag featured a skeleton holding an hourglass in one hand and a spear aimed at a bleeding heart in the other. The message was not subtle. Your time is running out, and death is coming for you. Other captains used full skeletons, swords, hourglasses, daggers piercing skulls, arms holding cutlasses, or even depictions of themselves standing triumphantly on the skulls of their enemies. It was an early form of corporate branding, centuries before Nike slapped a swoosh on a shoe. The flag told merchant ships who you were, what your reputation was, and how terrified they should be. Some captains' flags became so notorious that merchant vessels would surrender the second they recognized the design on the horizon, no cannon fire required. Branding works. Even pirate branding. Especially pirate branding. 28. The phrase, "no honor among thieves," is practically a subtitle for every pirate movie ever made. Crews constantly betray each other, steal from crewmates, and scheme for bigger shares. Excellent drama, terrible history. Pirate crews operated under strict written codes of conduct that every member signed and that were genuinely enforced. Stealing from a fellow crew member was one of the most severely punished crimes on a pirate ship. Depending on the captain's code, the punishment for internal theft ranged from marooning on a deserted island to having your ears and nose slit open, which marked you as a thief for the rest of your very difficult life. The pirate code was not a vague suggestion or a loose set of guidelines. It was a binding contract that every single man agreed to before his boots touched the deck. These codes covered loot distribution, injury compensation, conflict resolution, and daily responsibilities. The system worked because it absolutely had to. Mutual trust was the foundation of pirate society, which is ironic considering their day job. If you could not trust the guy next to you during a boarding raid, the entire operation collapsed. Pirates enforced internal honesty with a level of seriousness that would make most corporate compliance departments look like a joke. 29. Based on movies, you would assume the golden age of piracy lasted for centuries, generation after generation of pirates passing down the trade like a family business, an eternal empire of maritime crime. The reality is almost embarrassingly short. The classic Caribbean pirate era that Hollywood cannot stop romanticizing, the age of Blackbeard, Calico Jack, Anne Bonny, and Charles Vane, lasted roughly from 1715 to 1730. That is about 15 years. To put that in perspective, the entire golden age of piracy was shorter than most TV shows about pirates. It kicked off when the War of the Spanish Succession ended in 1714, dumping thousands of unemployed sailors and surplus warships into the market with no jobs and a very specific set of skills. It ended when the British government actually bothered to do something about it and started handing out amnesty deals. Within a decade and a half, the most romanticized crime wave in world history was basically over. Every movie, book, costume party, and theme restaurant draws from a window of time shorter than some celebrity marriages. 15 years of chaos, and we built an entire global mythology around it. That is honestly impressive branding. Pirates should have gone into marketing. 30. The pirate as a total rebel against all government authority is a core Hollywood fantasy. The lone outlaw who rejects society completely and lives by his own rules on the open sea. Very cool, mostly fiction. A massive number of so-called pirates started their careers as privateers, which were basically government-approved pirates. Nations like England, France, Spain, and the Netherlands issued official documents called letters of marque, which were legal permission slips for private ship captains to attack and rob enemy vessels during wartime. It was literally state-sponsored piracy with a fancy piece of paperwork. The problem came when wars ended. Suddenly, thousands of experienced, heavily armed sailors lost their legal authorization but kept all their skills, ships, and very strong desire to keep making money the only way they knew how. So they just kept doing it. Without the paperwork, the jump from privateer to pirate was less of a rebellious statement and more of a paperwork issue. Some of history's most infamous pirates, including Henry Morgan and Captain Kidd, operated under letters of marque at various points. The difference between a national hero and a wanted criminal was often just an expired government contract and a change in foreign policy. Bureaucracy has always been the real final boss. 31. Movies treat scurvy as a funny little inconvenience. A pirate loses a couple of teeth, makes a silly face, everyone laughs, and the adventure rolls on. A harmless gag. The reality of scurvy was a slow-motion horror movie that would make actual horror directors uncomfortable. Scurvy is caused by a deficiency of vitamin C, which sailors on long voyages could not get because fresh fruits and vegetables rotted within weeks at sea. Symptoms started with crushing fatigue and progressed to bleeding, swollen gums where teeth literally fell out of your skull. Then it got worse. Old wounds that had fully healed would reopen because the body could no longer maintain its own connective tissue. Bones became brittle. Skin turned yellow and developed dark blotches. Psychologically, victims experienced severe depression and vivid hallucinations. Historians estimate that scurvy killed over 2 million sailors between the 16th and 18th centuries, more than storms, combat, and every other disease combined. Scurvy wiped out more pirates than the entire British Royal Navy ever managed to. The fact that Hollywood turned this into a punchline about goofy missing teeth is genuinely one of the most disrespectful historical rewrites in cinema. 32. Most people assume the word pirate is some colorful Caribbean slang that popped up during the Golden Age. Maybe it sounds vaguely Spanish, maybe a little French. Nope. The word is ancient Greek. It comes from pirates, derived from the verb peiron, meaning to attack or to attempt. The Greeks used it to describe anyone who attacked ships, which means humans have been labeling sea criminals with essentially the same word for well over 2,000 years. The term traveled from Greek into Latin as pirata, then through Old French and eventually into English. So when you call someone a pirate today, you are using a word that Aristotle would have recognized, and honestly, he probably would have had something annoyingly philosophical to say about it. The concept of piracy is genuinely as old as boats. The literal second humans figured out that vessels could carry valuable things across water, other humans figured out they could just take those things. Piracy is not some Caribbean invention. It is one of the oldest career paths in human civilization, right behind the other profession that nobody discusses in polite company. 33. The last and maybe the most stubborn Hollywood lie is that piracy was a lifelong profession. The grizzled old captain who has been raiding ships for decades. The seasoned crew who grew old together on the waves. Very cinematic, very fake. The average pirate career lasted about 1 to 2 years. That is it. Most people did not turn to piracy because they were passionate about crime on the water. They were desperate. Unemployed sailors, escaped slaves, military deserters, or men fleeing unimaginably brutal conditions on merchant vessels. They pirated long enough to scrape together some money, and then they got out. Many accepted government amnesty, like the famous pardon issued by King George I in 1718, which forgave any pirate who surrendered by a set deadline. Others quietly took their earnings and went back to regular life, becoming farmers, merchants, or tavern owners. The romantic image of the career pirate who sails until he dies is almost entirely invented. For most, piracy was a temporary side hustle in a world that gave them almost no other options. A desperate sprint, not a lifelong marathon. And knowing that honestly makes the real story way more human than any movie ever could. So that is the truth about pirates. Almost everything Hollywood fed you was either exaggerated, twisted, or completely made up by novelists who never stepped on a boat. The real golden age lasted 15 years, the most successful pirate was a woman, and the scariest flag was not even black. Now here is what I need from you. I know we covered 33 lies, but there is no way we got them all. What is the biggest pirate myth we missed? Drop it in the comments because I guarantee someone down there knows one that is even dumber than walking the plank. Hit that like if Hollywood owes you a personal apology. And subscribe because next time we are ruining something else you loved as a kid.